Hi everyone, my name is Christine. I wanted to create an easy quilt that was simple and fast to sew together. Please follow along as I show you how I made my brick and mortar quilt. Here we go. For my brick and mortar quilt, I am starting off with a center square that is 5 inches by 5 inches, and the mortar part is 1.5 inches by 5 inches. And I will sew it with a 1/4 inch seam. And I am using like a medium to dark gray thread. My stitch length is set to 2.5 in length. Take some stitches to hold it. Make sure it's lined up here. And I have tape here at my 1/4 inch line to help me guide it through. And then I will just finger press this over. I don't want to stretch it. I'm just kind of folding it over and pushing down, but I will take this over to the iron to get just a nice seam, and then I will add on the next section. I wanted to use my 2.5 inch Halloween fabric strips and 1.5 inch strips in that purple fabric. After my first round, I thought I better drop a pattern to make sure that the idea I had in my head actually turned out in the quilt. Okay, I drew up kind of a pattern. I'm calling it brick and mortar. I've never made this before. I'm just kind of creating it as I go. So I started off with the 5 inch center square as we did before. And the purples are always going to be 1.5 inches. The strips going on from here are always going to be 2.5 inches. You don't have to backstitch in quilting, but sometimes when I start a new row, I just do. I don't always do it, but you don't have to, but sometimes I do. It kind of helps prevent it from unraveling until I get going on that next piece. So I'm just going to finger press here, these down, and then I'm going to add the purple to here. I am going to take my 2.5 inch strips from here on out and just sew 1.5 inch strips to 2.5 inch strips and just kind of go on from that. See if I can't make this process faster. Also, when I backstitch sometimes at the beginning, I start off down a ways so that my needle and thread doesn't get pulled down into the feed dog. So if you start down further and then go back, your chances of it getting sucked down in there get reduced a little bit. Not all the time, but it does help. All right, so I'm going to iron this down, and then I am going to sew the 1.5 inch purple strips to a whole bunch of 2.5 inch strips. Okay, so I've sewn some 2.5 inch strips with purple on there just for when I start to get to the longer sides. But for the shorter sides, I have a lot of scrap pieces that will work perfectly here. So I didn't want to sew the 1.5 inch. I just thought I'd go ahead and add it to it and just kind of sometimes look at the characters on where I want them to fall on there. So I think I'm going to go like this. And then, so this is the first round I did, and then this is the second round. So if you're looking at the purple part, bottom, right, top, and then we'll go left. So for this one, I want to make sure these go are in it. So I'm going to go like this. And then since I can't really see, and when you have pinked edges here, I just usually line up the edge with the fabric. Sometimes you can go to the bottom of the peaks here down in the valley or to the top, just whatever you want to do. But so with this one, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over. So I have this piece on top. And get it started there. And then I'm just kind of lining it up here and up there. Because sometimes when you lay it down, it can kind of bow this way a little bit. So I'm lining it up here, and then I'll come up here, kind of make sure that's over and hold it, and make sure that's pushed over. I'm not too worried about it. You know, it'll all work out. Like I said, I love to finger press before I do the next one. So I know that I did purple, purple bottom, purple right, purple top. And this will be enough. So this was the end of another piece, another scrap piece. So I'm just going to put this up here. Make sure this end is going past here so that when I trim it up, we won't have any cut off. I'm just doing this here at the machine before I go to the iron. And then so I am just laying this down. I'm not pulling on it. I'm just laying it down, and I will just kind of scratch over, make sure that this line is lined up with those peaks, so on through. Okay, so I'm over here at my iron, and I'm just flipping this over. I'm not pushing it too hard. I'm just kind of pushing it over and laying it flat, and then I'm pressing. A real hot iron, and I always use steam because you always want everything to lay nice and flat. Just makes it so much easier. Okay, now let's go trim this one up. Okay, so I just want to trim it off going up here and up here. So just use whatever ruler you have. And I am just lining up this with the edge right up there. I kind of pay attention to this line being straight a little bit as well, because things can get a little bit wonky, but I'm okay with it. And then I also want to trim up this side here. Okay, so that is round 1, 2, 3. Here you can see I have my fabric strips lined up in a color order, but I choose them at random. I add whatever color I think looks best, sewing a 2.5 inch strip first, then the 1.5 inch purple strip. I take it on over to my iron to iron that seam open and then trim off the edges. As the quilt grows larger, I will sew 2 of the same fabrics together to make one long strip. I think it would look really scrappy if 2 or 3 different fabrics were sewn together to make that long strip. So I will definitely be trying that on a future quilt. Alrighty, I am making my rounds here, and normally I just put that ruler up here and cut this off, but every once in a while I'm coming over to my cutting mat and I am using my long ruler, it's 24 inches, and I am lining up at, it's about 1.25 inches between this black flower pattern and my purple. And so just to keep this straight and to see if there's any like curving over here to prevent it from getting more and more wonky as it goes out. I use my weights there. So I just trimmed off. I can hear it just a little bit. So there's the corner I would normally trim off. And then yeah, there's not very much, but you know, that can add up over time. Plus it just kind of makes me feel a little bit better that I'm reconfirming that things are staying straight. And it doesn't take very much time to do that. So I'm just going around on all 4 sides. I don't see anything on that one. And so here's the other corner I need to trim. So I'm just finding a standard line over here that looks pretty even. And then going back to that 1.25 inches right there. So I'm seeing right here my piece that I would cut off. And then I can also see right here, I have just a smidgen. So see, you can see it's not very much, but it didn't take long. Check this side. Since I'm already over here, just check in my 1.25 inches. And I'm not seeing anything over here, so I'm not gonna trim that. So I'm just gonna keep building till it gets to, I don't know what size. I want it to for sure be a throw size, and with this it's going to be square. So let's just keep adding to it, and it's kind of fun just using up, you know, scrap 2.5 inch strips, whatever you have, and let's see what we turn out with. Our brick and mortar quilt is coming along beautifully. This was our first brick and mortar. And so each time I added a section, I kind of just went around like this to make sure I didn't add on to the wrong side. So just going in a counterclockwise motion like this, I just kind of went around to the purple to make sure that I added on. So this is going to be my next section. But a good indicator is that you will have 1, 2, 3, 4 seams here. There will not be that on any other side that you're going to add on to. So always remember that you will have the 1, 2, 3, 4 seams. That's going to be your next section to add on to. Okay, I wanted to show you what I do when I'm dealing with a long strip of fabric here when I'm ironing it open. I'm on my last round, and so I'm taking my iron and I am setting my seam. What I like about this is it heats this up and relaxes those fibers. And I'm just kind of going through, and I take my hands like this with my fingers and kind of massaging that over a bit to get it to be as straight as possible. A lot of times I'll just go like this and iron it, but especially with smaller strips like this, they can start to bow. So with this way that I do this, it helps keep it nice and straight just by kind of doing it with my fingers first and then going through and pressing this seam with a super hot iron. And I always use I always have my steam on all the time. So here, I'll show you one more time here on the end. So on this part, you can probably do it without ironing the top. I just like it because it just warms it up and makes it easier to flip over a little bit, especially when you're dealing with an intersection right there or a seam. Because on these longer pieces, I sewed strips together because some of them were fat quarters, so it didn't expand the length. So there. So see, it kind of prevents it from bowing a little bit. There we go. So I brought my cutting mat in and a ruler and my rotary cutter. And like I said, this is my last round. So it's going to be loaded onto the long arm machine, but I still like to trim up the extra pieces and stuff. Even though it'll be trimmed up after I quilt it, I still just like to cut these off. Now, I am not doing a big border on mine. I do think that doing a, you know, a large maybe border out of the purple would have been really cool. I just ran out of fabric. So I'm just going to go ahead and quilt it, and then I'm going to bind it with this purple fabric. I have enough for doing that. Okay, so nice and trimmed up. So I'm going to make some fabric for the back and get her quilted up. I sewed 18 rounds for my brick and mortar quilt to finish at 57 inches by 57 inches. I will definitely be making more quilts with this pattern, especially baby quilts. Thanks for watching, everyone. Have a great day.